Everyone knows the classic chess advice. Develop your pieces, castle early, and never trust yourself when you think, I'll play just one more game before bed. But if you want to get ahead of the crowd, you need to know something else, something different, and in this video I'll share with you 8 tips that actually make a difference. Let's start with this position. It is white to move, white's got a winning position, but which move would you play? This brings us right to the first tip. Stop playing the Blunderian gambit. In this case, the most played move by white is pawn to g3, trying to kick this queen out, but it actually nudges black into playing the winning move queen takes e4, which attacks the king and also double attacks this rook in the corner. And to make things worse, most players continue here with knight to e2, which allows black to not only capture the rook but do so with a check, and now white is totally crushed. Alright, maybe that was just a sudden bad luck, but the second most played move by white here is queen takes g7, which probably blunders both queen takes e4, but also queen takes f2 because it's guarded by the bishop. Here's the issue. A lot of players believe that in order to be an advanced player, you should be able to calculate many moves ahead like a grandmaster, but the reality is way different. Before playing your move, just ask yourself, if I play this, what can he take? This thing alone is more important than lots and lots of other chess rules combined. And in this position, by the way, the third next most played move is queen to f8. And probably white thought that the game is over, and they're kind of right. Moving on to the next idea, it is also white to move, and you may think for a second, how would you play here as white? The challenge is, you've got plenty of moves to choose from, and this is quite a common situation. So how do you know which one is the most important? Here's the rule, which lots and lots of players underestimate, or rather don't know at all. A central pawn is like a door. If you blockade it, his pieces cannot get out and you win easily. Now, imagine you play any random move. Let's say you play bishop to b4, which looks pretty good. It attacks his rook. But now this pawn is free to go, and the situation immediately becomes way more complicated for white. Now, your pieces are attacked, this bishop is active, and again, it's very unclear what to do. Compare it with the situation when you lock the door. Now, the bishop cannot get out, so as the knight, so as the rook. And basically, that makes your opponent completely helpless. Black goes b5, trying to expand on the queen side and maybe give some space for his pieces there. But now you're so dominant that you don't even have to care. You go rook to g4, he tries to protect his king, but as we're saying, don't judge a rook by its cover. You sacrifice the rook right here. He cannot capture with this pawn because it's pinned by the bishop. Therefore, this move is forced. Now your bishop is hanging, but you can still ignore it, play rook to h4. Tal would be proud of you, you're sacrificing everything, black is defenseless, and it's a checkmate. Here's the next problem that a lot of students shared with me, and maybe you'll feel the same. It is that you can often find even advanced level tactic while solving tactical puzzles. But somehow it's way harder to find tactical opportunities in your actual games. And that is very understandable. In a puzzle, you know there's a winning shot and you are on the lookout. But in a real game, nobody tells you, nobody gives you a signal. And here's the rule. You gotta count your opponent's king bodyguards, right? So here's this. Look at this king. How many bodyguards does it have? And you can see that most of his pieces are actually stuck on the other side of the board. And the one piece which is nearby, that rook on f8, is kind of useless. It's got stuck behind a pawn and is not really doing much anyway. When you see a situation like that, a king without much bodyguards, that gives you a sign that you gotta switch into that puzzle mode and become on the lookout for those checks, captures, threats, and winning shots. In the current example, this is the game between two strong grandmasters. They both actually missed it. White played rook to b1, missing the winning shot. Black also didn't notice the danger and played bishop b5, offering an exchange of bishops. But at this point, white finally noticed. It is rook to g4. You might have heard about checks, captures, threats as a way to look for forced moves and find combinations, and here we are. You're just looking for those moves. So rook to g4 is strong because other than that, yes, you can play this check, but that only leads to a repetition, right? It's not a victory. So rook to g4 check is way stronger. This is what he played in a real game. Now black has to capture it, and now this move actually makes a difference because as the king goes there, there is queen to h6. A very nice and subtle double threat because initially you threaten this pawn on h7, and there are different ways for black to protect it. For example, he can just capture this bishop on d3, but the challenge is now there is also queen to f8, and that is a checkmate anyway. Here's another very common situation, what to do in the middle game. All right, an opening, you've developed your pieces, you've castled, Now what? And by the way, this is Magnus Carlsen's game. It is white to play. Therefore, you can test yourself against Magnus Carlsen and see if you can find similar moves. Now, not that easy thing to do, of course, in general. But in this particular case, here's the rule. Advance your pawn majority. Here you've got 4 pawns on the king side versus black's 3, meaning you've got a majority. And the idea here is that you want to advance it. Notice that it's kind of the flip side of the same rule we talked about previously. Previously, we talked about noticing your opponent's weakness if his king does not have enough bodyguards. But in this case, we're talking about the other side of the same equation. You're trying to notice your strength and capitalize on it. If you have a pawn majority, you want to make use of it. Black played pawn to c5, opening up a diagonal for his bishop. Now pawn to f5, Carlsen just keeps marching these pawns forward. Knight to d4, kicks the queen. Now queen goes to f2, and then the next turn, Carlsen keeps pushing these pawns forward. Both moves make sense, either e6 or f6. He played pawn to e6, and indeed black is now losing the game. White is having a lot of threats, maybe f6 is coming, and if black captures, then this recapture is actually really annoying for black, because not only it attacks the queen, but it's also a discovered check. In this next position, it is white to play, and it represents another very common situation. It is when your opponent has just played a move that attacked you. In this case, black moved the knight to d7, which attacks this pawn on e5 twice. Now, what do you do about that? I'd say there are 2 common reactions, right? Reaction number 1 is to fall back to the Blunderian gambit, just don't think about your opponent and what he's planning to do. And the reaction number 2 is to become defensive, right? For instance, white may decide to play something like this to protect the pawn that way. But there is a clear downside. This bishop used to be very active right there, while now it looks like a tall pawn and is barricaded by your own pawn. So there is a more advanced version of thinking in such situations, and it is offense is the best defense. And yes, it sounds cliche, but the idea is deeper. The idea is, instead of being reactive, you try to evaluate your opponent's threat. So what is going on here? We can see that, okay, black is going to win a pawn, which is a very little material advantage. At the same time, it will take black extra time to do that while they're already underdeveloped. Therefore, you can see that it doesn't even sound like such a big deal, right? Or it could be even dangerous for black. And in this game, Tal played castling queenside, letting black capture the pawn, which black didn't and lost the game anyway. But if they capture the pawn, do you see what white has prepared? It is to sacrifice the knight first to clear the d file for the rook. And then, now once the file is open for the rook, we only need to deflect the final defender so that the king has no bodyguards. We're sacrificing the queen, and now we're finishing the game because the bishop controls the rook, and it's a checkmate. All right, we're moving on to the next rule, which will make you even more dangerous. In this position, it is black to play, and white is somewhat putting pressure. Your knight is pinned. This pawn on d5 is under the attack. And what would most players do? They think how to defend it, and they play something like bishop to e6 just to protect your pawn. But now you already know that offense is the best defense, and instead of guarding this pawn, you can push it forward and counterattack white. Now imagine he goes knight to e4, and what do you do here? Now previously we talked about the fact that in order to find winning tactical shots, you need to count your opponent's king's bodyguards, right? So that's one clue, but there is also one more clue that gives you a signal that you need to start thinking in terms of forcing moves, checks, captures, threats. And the sign is when there is tension between pieces, when pieces begin attacking each other. Look at this knight, it attacks your pieces. Also, your knight attacks this knight on e4, the knight is pinned to the queen. You see, when pieces begin attacking each other, this is when you need to slow down for a second and try looking for checks, captures, threats, and winning shots. Because in such situations, there is an opportunity for you to turn things around and to win the game. And if you think that way, you can notice the move knight takes e4, which is a beautiful queen sacrifice, and you would not find it otherwise, but when you're on the lookout for combo, you can definitely notice that now you've got one more forced move, the bishop check, and white is in trouble, because if they cover with a knight, then you take it, and now I will have to give their queen back, and as a result of this forcing line, if we calculate till the end, here white played it back, but it doesn't really matter. Let's say they capture, you recapture, and now you're up a knight and should win this endgame. And here's one more general idea that will help you a lot throughout opening to middle game stages. You've probably heard the rule control the center, or if you control the center, you control the game. And it's all great and nice, but a bit generic, and because of that, it's very hard to actually use it. And that's why I want to actually tell you exactly what you should be doing and what it actually means. It means occupy center with pawns. Simply put, onto these 4 central squares, you want to have more pawns than your opponent. All right? Let's evaluate the situation right now. Right now, who has more pawns onto these 4 squares? Right now, black's got 2 pawns, white's got 1. This means that black has some advantage there. But of course, we also see that there is some tension, some exchanges are probably going to happen. And what should you do? Now, think about it this way. If I take here and black recaptures, now what do we have? Again, evaluate the situation in the center. Now black has 2 pawns, white has nothing. Really bad for white. Certainly not what white wants. Let's take this back. How about this capture? All right, now we eliminated one of his pawns and we added one of our pawns to the center. Great. He'll probably do the same. All right, now what? Should we take? Not really, right? He'll probably recapture, attack the king, we'll capture this pawn, and we'll have nothing left in the center. All right, what else can we do? I played pawn to d4, and now we can see that the situation is turned into white's favor. Now we've got 2 of white pawns versus only 1 pawn of black. Already nice for white, but on top of this, this pawn on e4 looks isolated. Probably white will be able to surround it, attack it, and win it later on, and then black will have nothing versus white's 2 pawns in the center, and white will have a total domination. If you want to see the rest of the game, I'll link it down below in the description. It actually covers some other interesting rules. You might have heard about positional play. Sounds intricate, right? But it actually means putting your pieces to good positions. That is all that matters. And how do you actually do that? Now, so far we were talking about pawns, and we told that you want to keep them in the center of the board. All right, fine. What do you do with your pieces? You want to control the so-called large center, this square. Think of it as your pieces having their office in the city center, close to everything, connected to everything, and overall more influential. This was Capablanca's game, and he noticed that there is only one piece that's not on a4, which is outside of this large center. He goes knight to b2, aiming to relocate it to a better square. Black played knight to h5, attacking the bishop, and where would you move it? Same guideline, right? Move it to the center. Capablanca played bishop to e5, and on the next turn, he played knight to c4. And now notice that he's got this perfect setup, right? His minor pieces are exactly in the large center as the queen, and his rooks are not there directly, but they're influencing the same central files. And now, because his position was already dominant, he played queen to h3 with a double attack, and in his usual style, won the game with this simple logical elegance. And now you can look at our very first example differently. First off, we can see that the black king is lacking bodyguards. Secondly, we can see that pieces are attacking each other, which gives you a sign that you should be on the lookout for tactics. And the winning move by white here is a brilliant pawn to d4. And if you see why, let me know in the comments below. And if you want my help with putting all these different tips together into a single system that you will actually use in your games while playing, I'll leave a link down below to my Boost Your ELO 2000 bundle that contains a clear, simple blueprint for you to get there. And over the last 20 years, I've used it for thousands of students by now, and you can also benefit from it. And have a great rest of the day. Talk to you soon.